calculates our benefits. We have an education area that goes out and actually does employer seminars and does webinars to our members to educate them on their retirement plans. We have 6 retirement plans currently, 3 defined benefit plans, the benefit where the benefit is based on years of service and salary history. We also have 2 defined contribution plans where the benefit is based on their account balance. Within the defined contribution plan, we have each has 2 sub-plans. One is a true defined contribution plan where members make investment options that are subject to market movement. These particular sub-plans have been closed since 2003, so there's no new members. However, there is folks that are still working that are contributing to that plan. Also within the defined contribution plan is a cash balance hybrid type plan. Members do not make investment choices there. There's a guaranteed crediting rate of 5%, or the crediting rate is based on a federal midterm rate the federal midterm rate plus 1.5%. And if that is over 5%, then that's what they get. This particular quarter, interestingly enough, members are getting a crediting rate of 5.77%, which is the first time it's ever been over 5% since 2008. I'll go into a little bit about each plan now, if I may. The school plan is the first defined benefit plan that I'd like to talk about. Some of these numbers that I'm going to give you are a little dated. They're from our annual report, and right now we are busy compiling our new annual report, which I will come and give to the committee in March or April with brand new numbers. But just for comparison purpose, I'll give you what I've got here. The school plan is our largest plan. It has over 96,000 members. 43,000 are active and contributing to the plan. And then we pay over 26,000 retired members each month. The monthly annuity distributions are $63 million every month going out to school, retired and school employees. The contribution rate for the active members is 9.78% of salary. The employer then matches that at 101%. Plan funding comes from the employee and the employer contributions, investment returns that are through the NIC, and this is a dated number, but it was $15.6 billion in assets at the end of last year. Also, the legislature and the government puts in 2% of salary. This year, we asked for $45.8 million from the general fund money, and that is defined in statute. The funding ratio for the school plan is 98.42%. And I would just mention that according to NASRA, which is the National Association of State Retired Administrators, they do a survey, and the national average for defined benefit plans is 77%. So you can see that 98%, all of our plans are very well funded. And that's largely thanks to the Nebraska Legislature, their past history, as well as the executive branch in their funding of the plans. The second defined benefit plan that I'd like to mention is the State Patrol plan. It's quite a bit smaller. There's 932 members, 403 actives, 490 retired, getting a benefit every month. The monthly annuity distributions is about 1.8 million. Contribution rate for the patrol is 16 or 17%, depending on the tier that they're in. And then the employer matches 100% of that. Plan funding comes again from the employer and employee contributions. Investment returns, right now there is $552 million a dated number, but 552 million in assets. And there is an ARC that has been associated with the patrol plan. So the money comes from the general fund, 4.1 billion. The funded ratio in the patrol plan currently is 90.67%. So another very well-funded plan. The patrol plan has also tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 has a drop feature available where basically the patrol can retire. However, they continue to work for up to 5 years, but their retirement goes into a self-directed fund where they can pick the investments, and then after 5 years, then they can take that out and they have an additional piece of retirement. The drop plan though is closed right now. That was closed with the ending of tier 1, and so there are no there are new people going in, but the new hires are not eligible for that. It is important to know, probably for the state patrol plan, that they are not covered by Social Security. They're the only employees or members that are covered in our plans that are not covered by the Social Security plan. I would mention briefly the judges plan. It's the smallest in membership with 344 members. There's 195 of those are retired. They have monthly annuity distributions of 1.1 million. The employee contribution rate varies depending on the hire date and years of service. There is no employer match in the judges plan. The funding comes from the employee contributions, investment return. There's about 246 million in that fund. And then there's a 5% salary match that comes from the general fund. And in the past, court fees have also aided in funding that plan. The funded ratio is 101%. So it's our best funded DB plan that we have. The state plan, as I said, has 2 sub-plans. I'll talk a little bit about the cash balance plan first. There's 26,000 members. That has been mandatory since 2003. The monthly annuity distributions is about 4.5 million. The employee contribution rate is 4.88% and 156% employer match. Funding again comes from the employer and employee contributions, investment return, and those 2 things have covered the plan funding. There's about 2.2 billion in that fund. The defined contribution plan is a closed plan, has less than 3,000 members and 848 million in assets. The county plan is much the same, only the numbers are just smaller. Numbers of benefits, of members about 11.9 thousand, 1.2 in the DC, true DC subplan, and the assets are about 754 million in cash balance, as well as 265 in DC. About $1 million in annuity distributions. And the county only has 150% employer match for contributions there. It is interesting to note that in the state and county, the annuity option is not as well taken. Many people take their money out, move it, roll it over, that type of thing. That hasn't caught on as well as what maybe folks might think. The last plan I wanted to talk about is the deferred compensation plan briefly. It's voluntary. It has 17 investment options that are self-directed by the member. It's available to state employees and some county employees. If the county does not have a deferred compensation plan, there's about 260 million in assets there and about 5,000 total members. One more thing that I just would like to cover is right now it's a big project at our agency, and it's the OSTERS plan, which is the plan for Omaha. The OSTERS retirement DB plan for their school system has been administered by the Omaha Public Schools. It's one of the oldest plans in, I believe, in the country. And but a couple of years ago, through LB 147, it was decided that we would that plan would come under administration with NPERS. That is to be in effect September 1 of 2024. And right now we are working very, very hard to get that going. We've had an RFP out for programming of our computer system. Right now they're setting up VPNs and servers. The RFP was awarded and they're beginning that process to get our computer system up and running. We're also in the process of discovery for all the different processes and the things that the OSERS folks have. The intent was that Omaha, the Omaha plan is going to be a separate plan. It'll be our 7th plan that we administer. But we would keep that as much the same as we possibly could that they already have in Omaha. And so it's much the same as our school plan, yet it's different. There's different things there. And so we're in the process of discovering that. Omaha has lost a couple of key folks at their plan. They worked with their plan. And so I've got a couple of people that are actually, they're state employees that are working up in Omaha and learning that plan now. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. I would just point out I did give you an annual report. It is from last year, but I think only 2 of you may have gotten that already. So I thought it might be something new. There's a lot of information in there. I particularly like Appendix, I believe it's A, where it talks about the, I believe it's on page 33, I believe. Yeah, I would just note, it starts on 30, and it's Appendix B. And, I like to point out, this is a snapshot of 1 month payments for the retirement plans, and Omaha is included in this, of what the economic impact is for each county. And for instance, Dawson County, I believe, is Senator Ibach. There's $775,000 that goes into that county in the month of December into their economy. And of course, Douglas County and Lancaster County are the largest, primarily because of Omaha, the Omaha schools, and then Lancaster County would be because of it's largely state employees. But anyway, please look through that or give it to your staff. Have them look through it if you get questions. Chances are they're in there, but please give us a call as well. We're always happy to answer any questions that we might have or that you might have. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you. Any questions? Sarah Earl.
I just have one comment. And so often in these hearings, we say, well, what do other states do? So I find page 33 fascinating because if you're looking at dollars plugged into our economy down in Nebraska, we clearly have the highest percentage of the total.
I think it's
Should
very
I be impressed
interesting.
by that?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that 88% of all the retirement benefit stays within the state of Nebraska.
Thank you. That's just an observation, but I'm interested in that. Thank you.
Sarah Conrad.
Thank you, Chair McDonnell. It's good to see you, Mr. Gerke.
Good to see you.
Good to see your expertise remains with the agency. It's been a minute since I've served on this committee, but I've always appreciated your dedication to ensuring good governance of these really important programs that serve so many of our hardworking public employees' needs throughout the tenure of their lives. So I'm excited to dig back into things and get up to speed. Looking at really two pieces in the annual report that you passed out, I just wanted to open up a dialogue with you to see, and maybe it will be some similar questions to the finance and investment folks after you, but I see a lot of nuts and bolts in here. I see a lot of really important technical plans and logistics, but like I'm looking at the investment returns, and I'm looking at the plan status and the solvency as kind of those big picture things, which, you know, when you look at the plan status overall, as you noted, it's looking pretty good. That's really looks like it's moving in the right direction, and that's really, really good news. And then on the, you know, the page right before there, I'm looking at the investment returns and the significant amount of perhaps volatility that we are all well aware of in regards to our economy and the market as a whole. But Randy, if I could ask you, like, Mr. Gerke, sorry, I mean to get a bit informal there. What keeps you up at night? What are you most worried about as you're kind of looking forward? We've made a lot of progress. We're in a good spot now. What do we need to have on our radar screen, kind of big picture, as we start to work through some of the decisions before this committee and the legislature as a whole? Is that, you know what I'm trying to get out there, just to get a sense of?
I think our what keeps me up at night, there's a couple things that keep me up at night.
Well, related to this
but-
matter in particular, but agreed. Yes,
Well,
yes.
I was
agreed,
going to
yeah.
go there or stay there.
That's a longer area.
But the OSERS plan and our timeline there has been a lot of work, and it will continue to take a lot of work. It's in statute on when we have to get that done. We are subject to a lot of, the rules, and there are rules with the state, the procurement rules and those kind of things. It was difficult getting through some of that. There were reasons for why we do everything that we do. I fully understand, but we just got to keep that moving. Also, though, security for our system is something that's very foremost on our minds, and we worry about that quite a little bit. And we try to keep our system up to speed. I know we have asked for some things through appropriations that we feel we need to do to upgrade the system. And we'll be talking about that at another time. But those kind of things are what keeps me up at night.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Senator Clements?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Director Gerke. You mentioned the state employee contribution is 4.88% is the county, also 4.88% for
They are.
employees. But the employer part is 150%.
For county and 156 for state.
All right, and are these plans all June 30th fiscal years?
They are not. State and county is a calendar year, December 31.
That's what I thought. The others are June 30.
They are.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Any other questions? Director Gerke, thank you for all your work.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Michael Walden Newman. That's Michael, and last name is Walden-Newman. And I'm the State Investment Officer, which is my statutory title, working title. I'm the director of the Nebraska Investment Council. And as most of you know, the Investment Council is a standalone agency set up in the late 60s to consolidate the management of all public funds for the state of Nebraska. And there are a few of us around the country, but not that many. What I brought today, a little bit more about me. It's my first time in front of some of you. So I'm in my 9th year as the investment officer. I did this for the state of Wyoming for 10 years inside of the state treasurer's office, managing their public funds and trusts, mineral trusts for the most part. Before that, if you all know the Platt Institute, I was the director of the Wyoming equivalent of the Platt Institute for 17 years before joining the treasurer's office. And then just give you the full story. For 8 of the 10 years between the time I was 22 and 32, I lived and worked in a small country in West Africa in the Peace Corps and for the State Department. So there's my life. What I brought is just a series of charts to really tell you the story in a basic, straightforward way of what the Investment Council does and how we do it. I thought that would be the best use of your time. And as Director Gerke said, I love this. I could talk to you all day about it, and I eat a sack lunch by myself every day, and I'm always open for company. And I mean that. So on page 1, the page numbers are in red up in the corner. You have a list of the assets. The portfolios we manage run about $35 to $40 billion, depending on the markets. We work with, there are 35 separate investment programs that we oversee. We work with over 60 investment firms, and there are 150 separate investments within the overall portfolio. And you see the list there. About half of the money is in the various state and county retirement plans. We also oversee the investment of state trusts, and the one you're probably most familiar with, they're large and small. We commingle them for investments. But the one you're most familiar with and the largest trust is the education trust set up at statehood when lands were set aside at statehood across Nebraska, and the revenue from those lands is used to fund state programs, primarily education. So we manage those funds. We also run what I call the state's checkbook. Our name, the official name for it is the Operation Investment Pool. And what it is the checkbook with, unlike my personal checkbook, this checkbook has over 800 separate lines in it, which represents all of the funds and subfunds for all agencies for the state of Nebraska. Our funds are managed externally by investment firms, except for the OIP, which we manage in-house, and I'll explain exactly how those funds are invested here in a bit. The structure of the Investment Council is we're an independent agency, a non-code agency, meaning we're governed. I'm not part of the governor's cabinet directly. We are all state employees. On staff, there are 9 of us. But our bosses are the Investment Council Board of Directors, and it consists of 8 Nebraskans. 5 of them are appointed by the governor on 5-year staggered terms, and they're business people. They're not constituent reps of the various accounts that we oversee. These are business people appointed by the governor and confirmed by you all. And then we have 3 statutory ex officio members: the state treasurer, the director of the pension system, Randy Gerke, and then also the director or administrator of the Omaha school system. And the reason for that is I came here in December of 2014, And in January of 2015, I was called over by the chair of the retirement committee and asked how I'd feel about taking over the management of the assets of the Omaha school system, which were in trouble. And I said, sure, let's have a look. It took, like important legislation, a couple sessions to get that done. And we took over official management of those assets on January 1 of 2017. So it's been 6 years now that we're overseeing those assets. And as Director Gerke explained, the administration was left with Omaha, and we took over managing the assets. And now, as he explained, the administration of the program is moving to NPERS as well. So you see our staff, the board, their job, we have statutory responsibilities, but in a nutshell, this is it. The board sets the policy for the program. They hire me, and they hire and or fire the investment managers. In some shops, you'll see that delegated to staff, and that rests with the board. And so they implement a program based on our recommendations, but they make the ultimate decisions on policy and on the managers. On page 2, you see the change in the funds. That's a combination of just general growth in deposits of funds, and then also investment returns. And we'll talk a little bit about investment returns here at the end. But you can see that they've grown steadily over time. And they're nearly twice at their peak of what they were when I came just 8 years ago. The asset allocation, or how we divvy up the funds and into what types of investments we invest, is the primary driver of investment returns. And you know that personally, you're told that, but it's true. And we know that as well. So we take a lot of time in designing the asset allocation for the various types of funds we manage. The funds are pooled for investment so that we can take advantage of scale with our investment managers. You get a cheaper rate if you tell them you're going to invest $1 billion with them than if you're going to invest $10 million. And that's how we do it. So the retirement plans mirror each other in their investment type and asset allocation. And this is the picture of it. So we have investments stocks that are US only stocks, managers we hire for that, non-US stocks, global stocks, and a global manager is a manager who can buy both US and non-US. It's that simple. Then for the retirement plans that are here in the chart on page 2, their allocation is 30% in bonds for that stability and predictability that bonds normally give you. And the 70% is equities, both public equity, stocks that you know that trade on exchanges, and private equity or private real estate. We have small allocations to those, unlike our peers who tend to have much larger allocations to private investments. Our money has been kept in public investments and on public exchanges. So we take our time in designing the asset allocation, and we don't change it all the time. We're not hiring and firing managers willy-nilly. We watch returns. I watch them all the time. We formally watch them on a monthly and report them on a quarterly basis and compile them on annual charts that you'll see. When we make changes to the allocation, we conduct blank sheet reviews where we literally deconstruct the portfolio and ask ourselves, if we were building it today, how would it look? Not how can we tweak what's been in place for 20 years. So we take it all apart and put it together, and it takes a year or so to do it by asset class. And we take that time on the back end, because once we put it in place, we let those portfolios run for 5 years and longer so that the markets have time to play out over cycles, and we're not overreacting. If you look on page 3, you see then the difference between the retirement allocation and the endowment allocation for the trusts. The retirement timeline is infinite. we're investing these portfolios, let's say teachers, we're investing these portfolios not for the teachers that are retired today or the teachers who are working in the schools today. We're investing the portfolios so that there'll be a retirement system like this for the teachers who aren't born yet. So our investment horizon is out there on the far horizon. The endowments are a bit different, and we need that equity allocation to grow the portfolios over time. The endowments are a bit different. They have a 50-50 fixed income and equity allocation because they're so dependent on the yield, the actual cash that's kicked off by the portfolios. And so we have a higher fixed income bond allocation to provide the yield that they need. And then the equity component is there for them to be able to have the inflation hedge that you get from stocks and alternative investments. So they're 50-50, but again, commingled. And when we present our annual report here in a month or so, you'll see the listing and it's available online. And then you come to the OIP, the state's checkbook. The checkbook isn't the place to put investments that you can't handle volatility with, because you don't want to write a check on the day the markets are down, right? And have to write the check for 80 cents on the dollar. So we keep that portfolio, and it's billions, right? It has grown to $7-8 billion in recent years. We keep that in cash, 15% of it in literal overnight cash, and the rest is what I call extended cash. It's essentially a bond portfolio that can go out up to 10 years. We keep it around 4-year duration, but it gives you more return by going out. And normally, that's supposed to be the sleep well test at night are these bonds. And we've all learned that in this year, bonds and stocks can both go down. And not only they go down at the same time. And who knew? Well, we knew in 2008 they did, and they did it again this year. So how then do we turn the markets into money? So if you see on page 4, there's a chart that shows you our expected returns, and these are long-term returns. Again, 10 years and 30 years, but 30 is arguably a bit long, even with an infinite time horizon. So you see even on 10 years, what our expectation is for the return, and we're talking total return, which is the dividends and interest income, the dividends from stocks, the interest income from the bonds pay, you buy a bond, you own the debt, the person that you bought the debt from pays you twice a year for that debt on your bond. And so that you get the dividend income, the investment income, and then the growth in the value of the asset creates your total return. So these are the long-term expected returns for each of the asset classes in our portfolio, along with the volatility of those returns. In other words, plus or minus what that return could be, and you can do the math yourselves to see what the range is over a 10-year period. 2/3 of the time, we expect the returns to come in within that. And what's very nice is that the retirement system's expected return for the plans, which is now on its way towards 7% by the year 2024. It's been higher, like most were back in the day of high interest rates. Their expected return, which factors into the health of the plan, is now in sync with what we think our long-term return is on the portfolios based on our asset allocation. And that is exactly where you want to be, that the portfolio is invested in a way that meets our safety requirements and risk requirements, but in a way that should meet the financial requirements for the investment plan. And again, I just view it as in a simple sense of how you turn the markets into money, right? But speaking of markets, I wanted to end with just the returns. So we'll start with this path, with what we're going through right now, which isn't as wonderful as we'll end on a happy note, which how things were back in December of last year, and all of us have lived through it. Here are all of the the returns for the various assets we manage. And these are part of a much larger, this is one page out of a 250-page quarterly investment performance report that we get each quarter, compiled by Aon, who is another partner of ours. It's an investment consulting firm that we contract and use for manager vetting and portfolio construction. But you can see the returns over time. I look at 3, 5, and 10-year numbers. Even if the 1-year number is terrific, you want to look at over time how you've done. And then the benchmark underneath is really important. The so what test for that benchmark number is how are we doing paying the managers we pay, compare, especially active managers who really do trade portfolios, compared to the index of the portfolios that you could get. In our portfolios, we buy index funds for all of our US stock exposure and all of our non-US stock exposure and some of our bond exposure. But those, we just buy the index. We buy the full market. We put our active manager money into our global managers who really were paying to pick stocks, either US or not, depending on where they think they can get the best return based on our policies. So luckily you see across here that even in bad years, we've beaten our policy benchmarks. And that's what you want us to do. And then to end on a happy note, the last page is how things looked last December. And during that year, Senator Clements asked about the plan years. These are December 31 numbers, which are the plan year for the state and county cash balance retirement plan. The other school judges and highway patrol plan works on a fiscal year of July 1 to June 30. Those numbers that happened, but not just in December, but in July, were the highest ever because of how markets were. So we rode with our allocation to equities and an over allocation to US equities on purpose. We rode those numbers up for the last 10 years with terrific returns. And then, of course, we've ridden them back down. But Senator, you asked about volatility. Should I just assume you were going to ask me to? Let me tell you. So I've told you a little bit about my background. Well, I was born in a little town in Kansas, a couple hours from here, but my folks moved in the 50s when I was a little boy to Oregon. So we're the cousins who lived far away, and you know them. You all have those cousins that lived far away and came home. My parents called it home till they died. Every other year they could afford it, and we'd come back. But anyway, when you live where I did in Oregon, the coast is an hour away. And when I go deep sea fishing, there's a point to this story. When I go deep sea fishing with my dad, he would always say, if you don't want to throw up when the sea gets choppy, you got to keep your eye on the far horizon. You can't watch the way. And I've used that in my investment life because it's absolutely true. Same thing. You can't get overexcited about it because if you do, then you'll sell exactly when you shouldn't. So we have every confidence that this year is going to revert to at least the mean at some point and not as far away as perhaps some people are fearful of. And we'll be back on track to meet our long-term expectations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Conrad?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Walden Newman. Thank you for anticipating the question as well. And I appreciate the lesson carried forward from your dad and the deep sea fishing experience. And it was definitely one that I was going to ask about, the hard lessons that we all learned during, the last very painful economic downturn and recession, to figure out, how we can move forward in a way that's more thoughtful or stable or anticipating. I think in economic terms, it's not, if we're going to have another downturn, it's always when, right? So trying to make sure we're prepared for that. But I think your kind of horizon approach answered my question in that regard. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, just as more of a kind of a global, kind of atmospheric kind of policy debate regarding investments that I'm seeing play out in some of our sister states, a bit less so here, maybe it's just starting to kind of bubble up a little bit, but is kind of the intersection of policy decisions, whether it's called socially responsible investing or divestment strategies that our own Senator Chambers helped to spur many moons ago. But it seems to me that overall our state has been fairly resistant to those kind of constraints on their ability to manage public employee accounts to ensure the greatest and best returns. Can you just tell me a little bit about what you're hearing and seeing in your world about those issues, which I know are, they seem like a hot topic today, but I think they're also kind of ongoing as part of those policy and kind of investment intersections and in the work that we do together?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, Monday afternoon, Monday next, I'm going to be in a new committee for me,
Okay.
the Banking Committee.
Yes.
And the reason I'm going to be there is because of LB 743 that was filed on the last day of bill filing. And I've been watching because I do need to pay attention to what's going around, and that's part of what makes this job fun because there's always something new. Am I old enough to remember divesting when
Right.
it was divestiture came with South African
Yes.
apartheid?
Yes.
And so there is a bill, LB 743, that was not assigned to my usual oversight committee. It was assigned to the Banking Committee. And I saw it, as I say, the last day of bill filing and was asked to file. Is this too much of a story?
No, this is helpful.
No,
Thank
this is
you.
great.
For me, it's helpful.
Yeah.
I can't see.
Same.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was asked to prepare a fiscal note due the next week. And so I went to the sponsoring senator staff the next day. I hadn't been asked yet to do a fiscal note, but I had it, you know when it's going to come your way. So I went over and asked if I could talk to the drafter of the legislation to understand and be able to prepare a fiscal note, perhaps based on what other states had done using this legislation. It looked like model legislation to me. And then was passed along to another senator who had worked with the sponsor on the bill, and then ultimately spoke to the state treasurer, who evidently was involved a bit too in this. And I found out that the bill was, I'm thinking out loud as I sit here, because I've been thinking about what I'm going to say next Monday. But this is a little preface. I'm just going to be honest because,
But
you know,
you
the
don't have
truth,
to
like
tip
I
your-
used to tell the kids when they cared what Dad said 40 years ago, let's just go with the truth and see how far we get, because if nothing else, it's really easy to remember. So here I am, and lo and behold, I found out that it is model legislation drafted by a couple of East Coast think tanks on the conservative side. But I've been looking for it because the Investment Council's been thinking about this since late last spring, when it's been around for decades. But late last spring, the CEO of BlackRock decided to write a letter to corporate America, letting them know how he thought the world turned and how investors need to keep that in mind. And let me tell you, that letter, not only it got everybody's attention and turned what had been a pretty perennial issue, certainly in the last 10 years, easily, into I think one of the hottest issues I've seen in my career. And I mean that I've spent 18 years doing investments. I came to it late in life, and it's been a wonderful thing. But for 18 years, I was on the other side. I was on the policy side of this, and I knew what ideas from all sides can do when you're a little early on in trying to implement policy. In my Wyoming days, I would tell another story that we all, a lot of us, our history is based on covered wagons, and what our ancestors learned is the safest place in that wagon train is in the middle of it. Not way out front unless you really know the way to California or Oregon, or the Willamette Valley where I grew up, and you don't want to be lagging behind either. And so we have this bill coming that is not in this committee because it applies to all investments. A lot of the bills are targeted to the pension funds or to the funds managed by state treasurers. And this bill is very broad. And so that committee has oversight over the broadest investment policies for the state, and as I understand it, why it's there. So I'll be visiting with them about this. And as of today, in a neutral capacity, because I don't believe state agencies should go in opposing legislation, because we work for the citizens. And so I really do believe this, that their will is expressed through you, and we're there to do the job. And last time I looked, the taxpayers of this state pay my salary. But that's not going to keep me from presenting some questions about the bill. And the primary one is the way the bill is drafted now. One interpretation could be of the list of items that are forbidden by investment firms to be providing to their clients, even if they don't apply to Nebraska and our way of managing. Because with BlackRock, they manage a lot of money, but it's in these index products that aren't bought and sold. They buy the market. They buy everything that's in the market, with however that market looks. Is that one interpretation could be that we couldn't use those managers if they provide that service that's not the way Nebraska sees the world, but the way Oregon sees the world. And because they're providing that Oregon's way for Oregonians, we can't use them because it violates what Nebraska holds as a value. And that's a problem, because I'm struggling not just with the timing and being able to craft a response for you all that will allow you to see all of the implications. I just can't do it in the time allowed. But I'm also at first blush, just on the surface, nervous that could be an interpretation, or one by someone who would choose to sue with that interpretation. And then I'm wondering, who am I going to give the money to invest? And that, Mr. Chairman and Senators, that may be a very simplistic view, but investing isn't complicated. It's just common sense with its own lingo. That's all it is. And so I tend to look at things like this. I mean, I'm looking like this, but if it doesn't make sense, it's just like anything we're trying to invest in. If I can't explain it to my beer drinking buddy next door, I probably don't need to be buying it for the state of Nebraska anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's the ESG, let's call it what it is. So ESG is a feeling, and I'm not set enough in my feeling to know how I could implement the feeling, if that makes sense. You
No,
can
that's-
see I'm
that's
still
helpful.
noodling. I'm still thinking about it. I'm
I-
wrestling with it.
Yeah, I appreciate your candor and your thoughtfulness, and I'm sure the conversation will continue, but thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Clements.
Yes, following up on that, has the Nebraska Investment Council adopted an ESG policy?
We've been looking at it since we meet 6 times a year. Right after, so in this last spring, this happens. At our July meeting, we called BlackRock out and asked them what they were up to. What is all this? We had a good conversation then, just to get my board up on all of this, because the statutes right now say that there's a statute that says we're not to make any investment if the primary reason is for social or economic development concerns. We think that handles it. We're fiduciaries, the statutes say that. We think that, and that we're to invest the funds with the primary interests of the beneficiaries, including the taxpayers of the state, because when it says employer payments, those are taxpayers. That's everybody's neighbor, but not just the people in those plans. So we think we're covered by that. But we have a board meeting on Thursday. So we told BlackRock, good, we'll have you back out. And we're having not only BlackRock, we're having ISS, which is a proxy service provider that's the subject of attorneys general condemnation recently, including ours. They're coming on Thursday, and we're having Vanguard as well, who has dropped out of a net zero, to come and talk more to us about this, and just really to try to wrap our arms around what is it in Nebraska law that doesn't already, we think we're focused and it's very clear. Our marching orders are clear.
My concern is that our actuaries are projecting 7% or more clear into the future, and that I would hope we prioritize the yield rather than a social agenda that might give us a smaller yield. Or is the yield going to be the priority?
Right. I can tell you the total return is the priority, and Director Gerke alluded to this. Most retirement programs across the country rely on investment returns for up to 50% of the funding of their program. In Nebraska, it's 30%. And the reason for that is because the state has always asked the employees to contribute a healthy amount. The state matches and has always made its payments, not overpromised benefits. So the reliance on investment income for those payments is low compared to our peers. And the law also says that we're to diversify the investments in our care in a way to avoid large losses. So when you talk about volatility, we're not riding this roller coaster. We're trying to set an allocation where the roller coaster looks like this.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? We appreciate all your,
Thank you.
you have one more?
Thank you.
We appreciate all your work.
Thanks for the time.
It's telling that you spend a lot of days having your sack lunch at your desk.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come by and take you to lunch one of these days. So, but thank you for all your work. Thank you for everyone being here.
Good to meet some of you new members.
Committee is ended. Thank you.
Right here.
Oh, right here,
You switch and binder.
don't have a long commute, okay. But somebody, I think whoever was here, maybe they lost their glasses.
Okay, yeah.
Consider searching for.
Tim, are you grab these for us, or do I need to flip the turn them back?
We're gonna get to a point where social good.
Who else is in here next? What's over here?
At a certain point, you're gonna have something social good. True profit. We're investing in profit.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
They're trying to. They always.
I'll get you back here.
Andy, you were thinking about how the experience
Okay, so there's some.
I should have known. My contacts are driving me crazy.
That's good.
Well, I didn't know there was supposed to be a press. Oh, we get this on the way.